got a question the other day asking me, what do I think about spinal decompression, or what are my favorite decompressions? So let's deconstruct that for a second. First and foremost, does your spine need decompression? Probably not, right? Because theoretically we're doing a whole bunch of movement, and our spine is a weight-bearing loaded structure. But sort of when I get to the bottom of the etiology of that question, what I tend to think is, hey, my back feels really stiff after training. What's that about? And then how do I manage it? So one of the things we know is that our coaching community has been solving these problems for a long time. And if we get to the bottom or the roots of some of the old sort of coaching maxims, there's a lot of knowledge there. One of my favorites is an old Russian saying, which is like, if you leave the gym stiff, you'll be stiff. And one of the things we know about our experience working with athletes now under doing lots of Olympic lifting, lots of heavy loading, is that oftentimes their backs get a little pumped out or they feel a little stiff after training. And what's that about? Well, it could be a lot of things. We tend to see that back pump out, back stiffness in heavy extension-driven movements. So back squat, heavy cleans, things like that, oftentimes will lead the athlete to feeling a little bit stiff on either side. Now, I'll point you to the king of all spinal decompression or restoration of spinal movement, Donnie Thompson. So if you go to Big Super D's channel, you'll see that he flips his athletes upside down, hips hanging here, and just get some motion as a relaxation. But if you don't have a mechanism by which to flip yourself upside down, even so much as doing the splits machine where you're just supporting yourself and then being able to just unload the upper torso and restore range of motion here, that's a simple idea, right? Just hanging. But don't get too fancy. If you're feeling stiff, oftentimes what you'll see is that the solution to that is just to put a little flexion into the system. And so a way of thinking of this is, hey, I've been driving towards extension, I'm leaving that mid-range, I've ended up a little bit close towards my end range tolerances of extension, my body's getting a little stiffer, trying to protect me from those end ranges. Not a back problem, except that, hey, if I'm stiff there, I may be down-regulating my ability to generate more force later on. So even putting yourself into a little flexion by walking the feet forward and then just getting some restoration of movement in this position can do a lot. Now, if you go to our powerlifting friends, you'll see that Louis Simmons came up with the reverse hyper. And one of the things that they see about the reverse hyper is that we can take the spine sacrum section and make it work with the pelvis. So oftentimes what happens is that when we're in those heavy loads where I'm trying to manage spinal position, hip position, the sacrum is getting locked into a better position. And that makes sense, right? The mechanical benefits of that are very high. But that also leads to a lot of potentially extension-driven motion. So Louis found out that if he was doing a little bit of this flexion-based positioning with the reverse hyper, what he saw was, he could gap those joints a little bit, restore motion, lengthen the tissues, put blood back in the system, get fascia to let go, whatever it is. Restoring flexion is part of the magic of this decompression, or at least lengthening out a little bit. And it's one of the reasons why spending some time in this bottom position, the squat, is so key, is that, or having access to this position, because it allows me to completely rotate and get kind of global spinal flexion. You'll see that the good morning or Jefferson curl is another piece of the puzzle here that allows people to restore normal range of motion. And so whether you're flipping upside down on your back, with your feet up Pete Egoscue style, suddenly now you're doing Eldo or Egoscue with the pelvis in a tucked position here. What you're getting is lengthening of those erectors. You're getting lengthening of that posterior fascia. And so a lot of what ends up happening is we're signaling, might not actually be compressing or decompressing. Certainly that could happen. And if I'm extension sensitive, that could give me a little reprieve, certainly through traction. But by the restoration or restitution of this little bit of flexion positioning can do a lot to normalize and make backs feel less stiff after training. And that's part of the game. So the idea here is if you finish training, Even if you're doing Donnie Thompson's walk, holding a weight, notice what's happening. I'm getting a lot of rotation, I'm getting a lot of flexion in the spine, and it's really about making sure that my movement language is sufficiently robust that if I feel stiff after training, that I'm making sure the same way if I couldn't flex my elbow, hey, maybe my accessory work is restoring that range of motion in my elbow or maintaining my range of motion. Well, your spine is no different. So instead of thinking spinal decompression, think restoration of spinal positioning. How do you want to do that? It's up to you.